Hey guys, what's up? It's Ali with Kate the Jeep and the 511 Jeep JKU project. Today I'm here at Castle Fab with owner John Rook. John, what are we doing today?
Today we're going to install EVO Manufacturing's rear bumper and tire carrier, side armor, bomber sliders, and their front bumper.
With Stinger. One other thing that we're going to do is we're going to replace these taillights with their round LED taillights, because once we mount the tire carrier, that's going to be in that same area. So we'll get to that later. First things first, I think we have to remove all our stock pieces first, right?
That is correct.
All right, let's get to it. All right, first we're going to remove the rear tire. Now we're ready to remove the rear tire mount. We need to first remove the third brake light harness, which is located inside.
So to remove this cover, you need to pop the two tabs off from here. And it swings open this way. Be careful not to break these tabs. Now you can access this plug. Move that. Now we're ready to go.
Now that the harness has been disconnected, we can go ahead and pull the grommet out and pull the harness through. Now we're ready to remove the rear tire mount. This is done by removing a series of 13mm bolts all the way around the mount. It'll help to have somebody else holding onto the mount while somebody removes the bolts, or make sure that you keep it in place because it will fall once that last bolt is removed. Now we're going to replace the bolts that we just removed. Now all the bolts are in. Now we're ready to use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove our rear taillight. Now we're ready to remove the two harnesses from behind the taillight. To do this, the lower harness with the red tab, just go ahead and pull that out completely from the bracket. And the upper harness, push in on the tab at the bottom, and then go ahead and remove the harness. Now we'll do the same on the other side. Now we're going to remove our rear license plate mount. If you notice that there's a light on your rear license plate mount, so we're going to make sure that we have to disconnect the harness as well. But we're ready to do this too. Using a 3/8 socket, go ahead and remove the bolts from your license plate holder. And it should just slide out. We've removed our plate, which exposes the bolts at the top and the bottom of the license plate mount. What we're going to do is we're going to first remove our rear bumper in order to access the two bolts at the bottom to make everything easier for us.
To remove the rear bumper, we're going to first remove the two bolts on each side on the outermost part of the bumper, which are this one and this one. And then we're going to remove the two on the innermost part of the frame on each side. There's one here and one here.
Now that we've established which bolts we're removing, John is going to go ahead and remove the 16mm bolts using a 16mm socket with ratchet and 16mm box wrench. The other side is done the exact same way. As you're doing this, it's good to have a partner to help. Once all the bolts are removed, the bumper will come right out. And just go ahead and pull the bumper off. Now that we have the stock bumper off, we're going to go ahead and remove these rear brackets that have two 16mm bolts located behind them. And repeat for the other side.
Now that the side bumper brackets have been removed, go ahead and save 4 of these bolts to be reused on the EVO rear bumper install.
Now we're ready to remove our rear license plate mount. We're going to do this by removing 4 7mm bolts, 2 from the top, 2 from the bottom. You'll have to get a Mopar rear license plate plug to fill the hole that's now exposed on the back. Inserting a screwdriver into the slot, push in on the tab, then pull the harness out of the plug. Now we're ready to remove the rear stock tow hook. To do this, we're going to remove the 2 18mm bolts on the side and then the one on the bottom. Okay, now we're getting ready to install our Pro Series rear bumper, our EVO Manufacturing tire carrier, as well as replace the rectangular taillights with the circular ones, which will include installing the rear rock skins. So we're going to get started on doing that. So we've removed everything from the rear, and now we're going to work our way around the car. We're going to remove our rear fender. We're also going to remove our gas cap cover. If you have one aftermarket like this, we're going to remove that. And then we're going to work our way around the vehicle, removing our sliders and our front fender. Okay, now I'm going to remove these plastic rivets. We're not going to be reusing them. Also, inside the fender well, there's these plastic retention clips that we're also going to remove to pull out the inner fender and this whole piece. All right, so we have some plastic retention clips in the back. We're going to go ahead and pull on the inner fender out, and then there's a series of retention clips that hold the fender on. We're just going to pull the whole fender off. It'll just use a little bit of force, and it should come right out. So we're going through and pulling out the plastic retention pins that are holding on the inside of the fender. The outside of the fender, this main fender piece, is actually held on also by some clips. Once we get the inners out, then we'll be able to just yank on the fender and pull the whole thing out. If any of these clips get left behind, just go ahead and rip them out using a pair of dikes. All right, we've just about got everything out. We'll be ready to install our rear EVO Manufacturing radius fender. We just pulled off our Mopar gas cap cover, and we're going to be installing our rock skin corner. Once we do that, we'll see if we can reinstall this, or we may have to go and get another aftermarket piece to work. Now we're ready to remove the front fender. There's a series of 10mm bolts that we'll have to remove from underneath the fender in order to remove it. And I'm going to remove the remaining bolts, and then we'll be able to rip out the front fender after we remove the turn signal harness. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so I've removed the bolts that I need to remove. Now I'm going to go ahead and rip out the inner fender liner just by pulling down on the retaining clips. They'll all pop out. There's also a series of these retaining clips. They're basically like plastic rivets. We're going to go ahead and cut them off, as we're not going to be able to reuse them anyways. Now we're going to go ahead and pull off the fender. We're not going to be reusing anything, so I'm not too worried about breaking any of the retaining clips. So we'll just go ahead and pull it off nice and firm. And then, oh, we missed one 10mm bolt underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and get that off real quick, and we should be good to go. And the final bolt's right here on the bracket coming from the vehicle. So go ahead and remove that, and that inner fender liner should pop right off. Filming?
2, 1, go.
go ahead and pull it right out. Be careful of the harness. It may still be attached. Go ahead and find out, there's a little clip that holds it on the bottom. We're gonna go ahead and cut that off. And we're off. If you have any remaining clips, just go ahead and snap them off. Be careful of anyone who's around as they fly out violently. Okay, so we're ready to remove the stock Rubicon rock slider. There is a series of bolts and nuts that we have to remove in order to do that. We have two 10mm nuts in the middle and one 13mm bolt. There's actually 3 sections like this on the slider, one towards the rear tire, one towards the front tire, and one right where I'm at right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove everything, and then we'll remove the rock slider. Might be a good idea to try to pressure wash the underside of your car before you go installing all this stuff, because a face full of dirt's not very fun. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and just remove the rock slider.
We're ready to remove the stock bumper, and normally there's a skid plate here, but as you can see here, we had a little mishap on the trails. To remove the front bumper, you need to remove the 8 nuts that hold the bumper on. Make sure before you remove the stock bumper, if your bumper comes with fog lights, go ahead and remove the plugs now. Go ahead and remove the 2 harness plugs on the back side of the light. Go ahead and remove the 8 nuts holding the bumper on. On to the other side. It helps to have a second person able to hold the bumper. Now that all the nuts have been removed, go ahead and remove the bumper.
To start, we're gonna hold this in place using a ratchet strap. John's gonna go ahead and bring it over. And we're gonna mount to the latch for the rear door. And John has it connected on the inside of the passenger door. We have a ratchet strap connected to the rear door latch right here. And on the other side, we have it connected to the rear passenger door latch. We're using the C-clamp in order to pull in the rear rock skin corner and get it flush with the body so that once we start making our holes for the nutserts, everything will be in the right place. Okay, so we have the rock skin where we want it. In order to make sure that it stays in place, we're gonna drill out a few pilot holes and insert nutserts into those and then bolt it in. That way it stays in place and we can drill out the rest of our holes and make sure everything's on point. So now we're gonna remove the rock skin and install our nutserts and then reinstall the rock skin with the provided bolts. So what did you do right now?
I just drew a pilot hole.
What was your pilot hole size?
Now that the 1/4-inch pilot holes are drilled, we're going to step it up to 3/8 so we can insert the nutserts. Now that we have the 3/8 holes drilled, we're going to insert our nutserts using this tool. This tool isn't recommended, but it definitely makes life a lot easier.
Now that our nutserts are installed, we're going to install the rock skin and use the rock skin as a template for the rest of our holes that we need to drill. Now it's time to bolt in our rock skin.
We're going to put the 1/4-inch drill bit back on and use these holes as guide holes and finish drilling the rest of the skin holes. On these two rear holes, you might have to go through 2 layers of sheet metal to get the nutsert to fit in properly.
While we have the rock skin on, we're also going to draw out the line for where we have to cut in order to fit the new lights that we have to install in the rear.
Now we're removing the skin to finish installing the rest of the nutserts.
Now we're ready to install the rest of our nutserts. The hole have to be bigger?
Yeah.
Just like that. Now we're ready to install the bolts for the rock skins. These are stainless, so you want to make sure that you put a little dab of anti-seize on the ends in order to make sure that you don't end up with galling. Now we're going to reinstall the rock skin while making sure we have anti-seize on all of our bolts. All right, now that you have them all hand tightened, go ahead and torque them down.
So you can use the color code chart on EVO's site, or you can just listen to me and you can connect the white and yellow to the red, white and purple to the black, and the black wire to the white wire. And you're not going to be using this wire. This is the reverse light wire. You'll have to connect that later on if you add reverse lights. We're going to go ahead and first install the gasket for the round LED light. Get that positioned in the hole. Then we'll connect the new harness. Remove the tape on the back of the light. We're going to spray a little Windex in here to help lubricate the seal so the light will pop in easier. To properly fit the bumper, we're going to have to cut off these 4 bolts and bring them flush to the head of the nut. I'm going to put a little bit of paint on here to prevent any future rust from happening. First, you need to install these side plates because they're part of the rear bumper installation. All right, go ahead and tighten the side of these the bolts up to keep the plates on. Okay, right now we're going to go ahead and do a trial fit of the bumper. We're going to put in a bolt on each side to hold it up there, a C-clamp in the middle so we can drill 2 holes on the other side in the cross member. We use a C-clamp here to get the bumper position to the position of our liking. We use the pick to scribe a circle through this bolt hole on the cross member. And you'll do the same on this side. Once the bumper is removed, the 2 holes that we scratched on the frame, we're going to drill out to 7/16 of an inch. Now that the bumper's off, I'm gonna go ahead and center punch these holes that I scribed on the frame rail. I'm gonna first drill the hole with a 1/4" drill bit and then finalize it with a 7/16 drill bit. Insert the nut clip into the large hole next to the hole you just drilled and pound it into place with a hammer. The 2 nut clips that we had to install on the bottom of the frame with the 2 holes we drilled, we actually had to modify the clip on one of them and open up the holes that the clips slid through so they would properly line up with the new drilled holes that we did.
So keep that in mind. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the bumper. Nope. Nice. Once you've got your 21mm bolts and your 14mm bolts tightened up, go ahead and tie in your 60mm bolts on the back of the bracket that you had installed earlier. All right, our rear bumper is now installed and ready for the trail.
So right now we're going to trial fit the rear fender, and we're going to use these 2 holes that don't require to be drilled in nutserts. They just require normal bolts with nuts on the backside. We're going to use that to hold the fender up to make sure our nutserted holes that we have to drill line up right with the fender holes. Hold it up, you got it?
Yep.
Okay. So right now I'm looking through the holes, looking through all the through holes, and I can see some of them are off a little bit. So I'm putting little marks on them to show me which way I want to go with them so the bolt lines up properly. Now that I test fit the fender, I can see that all the holes are going to line up right, and we're going to pull it back off, drill them out, and insert the nutserts. So I marked all the holes I'm going to have to drill out for the nutserts. You're going to have to drill this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then these 2 you'd leave alone. You're just going to run normal bolts through those with nuts. Now we're going to go ahead and install the nutserts. Now that the nutserts have all been installed, we're going to go ahead and install the fender. We're going to start here first with the ones that don't require inserting nutserts, again, just to help hold the fender up.
Now go ahead and hand tighten on your stainless steel hardware. Make sure to go in nice and easy so as not to cross thread any of your hardware. Now that everything's been hand tightened, go in and tighten up all your nuts and bolts.
Now we're going to go ahead and mock up the front fender so we can drill the holes for the fender brace. Now that you have the front fenders mocked up, go ahead and inscribe these holes for drilling so you can attach the inner fender brace. Now that the holes are scribed, go ahead and remove the fender.
3, 2, 1, go.
After the pilot holes are drilled, I'm going to step it up to the actual size bowl hole.
3, 2, 1, go.
I'm going to hold the fender brace in here and scribe the other holes on the back side. Now we're going to drill from the outer hole and drill our new inner hole. Now that you've drilled your outer holes and inner holes, you can insert the fender bracket. Start by inserting the inner bolts first. Go ahead and leave them hand tight because you still need to insert the outer ones. Now it's time to attach the fender to the front quarter panel. Now that the fender's on, go ahead and install these on the outer holes of the fender bracket. This one here. Now that we got all the bolts in, go ahead and tighten everything up. And you'll repeat all these steps on the other side fender. Now the fender's installed and you're ready to go. To properly fit the bumper, we're going to have to cut off these 4 bolts and bring them flush to the head of the nut. I put a little bit of paint on here to prevent any future rust from happening. First, you need to install these side plates because they're part of the rear bumper installation. All right, I gotta get to go. Go ahead and tighten the side of these, the bolts up to keep the plates on. Okay, right now we're gonna go ahead and do a trial fit of the bumper. We're going to put in a bolt on each side to hold it up there, a C-clamp in the middle so we can drill 2 holes on the other side in the cross member. We use a C-clamp here to get the bumper position to the position of our liking. We use the pick to scribe a circle through this bolt hole on the cross member. And you'll do the same on this side. Once the bumper is removed, the 2 holes that we scratched on the frame, we're going to drill out to 7/16 of an inch. Now that the bumper's off, I'm going to go ahead and center punch these holes that I scribed on the frame rail. I'm going to first drill the hole with a 1/4 inch drill bit and then finalize it with a 7/16 drill bit. Insert the nut clip into the large hole next to the hole you just drilled and pound it into place with a hammer. The 2 nut clips that we had to install on the bottom of the frame with the 2 holes we drilled, we actually had to modify the clip on one of them and open up the holes that the clips slid through so they would properly line up with the new drilled holes that we did.
So keep that in mind. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the bumper. Nope. Nice. Once you've got your 21mm bolts and your 14mm bolts tightened up, go ahead and tie in your 60mm bolts on the back of the bracket that you had installed earlier. All right, our rear bumper is now installed and ready for the trail.
Okay.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Ollie with Kate the Jeep and the 511 Jeep JKU project. Today we're installing the EVO Manufacturing rear tire carrier. This tire carrier is awesome. It can hold up to a 42-inch tire and it's rattle-free. Let's go over the install. All the parts you need are included in the kit. 4 Johnny joints, jam nuts and pins, tire mount spinner and caps, and all bolts, nuts, and washers. 511 station grip gloves are not included, but highly recommended. The EVO rear tire carrier also requires the installation of the rock skin corner armor. With your rock skin or corner armor installed, now it's time to thread on your jam nuts onto your Johnny joints. Make sure that your jam nuts are fully threaded on. They will likely require adjustment later on.
Now that we have the Johnny joints fully assembled, we're going to go ahead and thread them on in these 4 corners. Now that we have the Johnny joints fully assembled, we're going to go ahead and thread them on in these 4 corners. Now we're on to the first corner. Make sure you start out by threading them in all the way. We're going to tilt it back so we can easily get to all the corners. Now we're on to the second one. Again, thread them in all the way. Ollie's on the other side, threading the third one in. Make sure you line them up this way, vertical. Now to the last one. Lining them up vertical will help with installation onto the brackets. The Johnny joints are all on, now we're on to the brackets. Before we can attach the mounting brackets to the tire carrier for a test fit, we're going to have to address something that came up. If you plan on installing a tire carrier after your rock skin is installed like we are, you may not want to put a nut cert here. Reason for this is you will be using a different size bolt that the rock skin uses. Go ahead and remove this and drill it out to the right size. For easier access to mount the brackets on, we're going to go ahead and remove the gas cap and tail lights. On to the next light. Now that the tail lights are removed on both sides, you might have to remove foam on the bottom side of the body to gain greater access to the mounting bolts. Go ahead and install the brackets. Make sure that the whole side is facing outward. Pins will be used on the driver's side. Insert the pin to hold it in place. Now let's put the second bracket on. Make sure the hole is facing outwards. Go ahead and put the pin in. On the other side, you're going to go ahead and use the bolts provided. Loosely thread the nut on the bolt. Now we're on to the last bracket. Again, keep in mind, hole faces outward. So now we're going to test fit this on the back of the vehicle. Go ahead and just slightly tighten these jam nuts just to keep these brackets from flopping around. We're going to go ahead now and do a test fit to see what adjustments need to be made. Since we're going to be doing some drilling in this corner for safety reasons, we went ahead and put the gas cap back on. We're going to go ahead and remove this bracket and loosely fit it onto the side armor. We're going to start by using an alignment hole we drilled out. Go ahead and snug this bolt up to make sure the rock armor is fully against the body. Gas cap. Did I do that? That's from. Go ahead and scribe these bracket holes. Do the last one on the outer side of the bracket. Now that the bracket's on, go ahead and use the holes as guides and drill out your bracket.
Done.
We're going to go ahead and put these in by hand. We're going to skip this hole for now to address a pinch weld issue later on. Go ahead and just make it hand tight. Now that this bracket's on, we're ready to test fit. Ollie's going to help me, and we're going to use this bracket to help us hold the tire mount up so we can do the final test fit. Now that we have the driver's side bracket helping us hold this up, we're going to go ahead and adjust these to fit properly against the side armor. To have the brackets fit properly, we're going to have to wind this out one turn. The bottom bracket, we had to wind out 3 turns. Fitment might be different between vehicles, so this is just a reference. Before you can scribe the holes in the brackets, you need to make sure the tire carrier is parallel with the top of the tailgate. Go ahead and scribe the holes. Onto the bottom bracket. Onto the driver's side lower bracket. Now that all the holes are scribed, go ahead and center punch them all. Now that all the holes have been center punched, I'm going to start with a smaller drill bit. Now we're going to go with the bigger drill bit. Repeat this process with the remaining 2 brackets on the passenger side. This is the hardware for the driver's side, and this is the hardware for the passenger side.
Now that all the holes for the brackets have been drilled out, we're ready to install.
I'm going to start with the driver's side. Ali's going to finish up on the passenger side. Due to some pinch weld interference behind these 2 bolts, I had to eliminate the washers so we could get the nuts on. Now that we have all the brackets hand tight, we're going to go ahead and put the tire carrier on. Go ahead and line up all the holes. This is the time when you're going to have to readjust your Johnny joints to make sure all these holes line up.
I'm with it.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we go out on that.
So I need to make these a little bit longer.
Just make the bottom one, do 1 turn out. Okay. Now that the tire carrier is on with the brackets, go ahead and tighten up all the bracket bolts. While you're tightening up the bolts for the brackets, go ahead and tighten up the bolts for the Johnny joints. Now that we have all the brackets tightened and on, tire gates on, we're doing our final adjustment with the Johnny joints to line them up with the holes.
Go.
This is the time you make your adjustments. If adjusted properly, they should drop in. You might have to adjust the holes. Now that everything's adjusted, go ahead and tighten the Johnny joint jam nuts.
Tire carrier's installed. You might notice we're missing our spare tire. We'll come back to that in the next segment, but for now, we're done.
We went ahead and removed the 3 body mount bolts that are located underneath the front door and the back door, and we're going to loosely install them in the EVO bomber. And we're going to do this because, in my experience, it makes it a lot easier to install the skin. I'm going to add some tape here to the corners here when we put the rock skins on to help protect the side of the car from getting scratched. Now that the bombers are loosely installed, we're going to go ahead and install the nut clips to the rock skins. These are ovaled. He pushed them in too far.
I just did a really good job, okay?
Now we can go ahead and carefully set the rock skin armor tabs. You gotta hook it in. You don't have to go ahead and tighten them up all the way for final fitment yet. Go ahead and pull the rock skin as close as you can to the bomber to get rid of this gap, and just barely snug these bolts. Now that all these are snugged up, we're going to go ahead and slide the bomber as close to the body as we can and tighten up the 3 body mount bolts. So we want to bring this up to the height so they're equal on both sides. So we got to come up to this black line here. So we got to loosen up the body mount bolts again, pull it out just a little bit, and push it up, then tighten it back up.
Oh, I see.
Try sucking up the middle one.
Are we good on this? Does that look?
That's, yeah, but you gotta push your back in more. It's gotta go in more.
Good?
Yeah, I think it's...
Cool.
Now that we have the bombers and rock skins in place where we want them, I'm going to go ahead and use the rock skin actually as a template to drill all the holes. Now that we've drilled out all these holes to insert our nutserts, we're going to pull the bombers and the rock skins off, go up one more size with the drill bit, and insert the nutsert. All right, let's drill all these holes out and insert the nutserts. Go ahead and remove the tape before you put the nutserts back on. I'm going to go ahead and undo these 10mm bolts on the front quarter panel because as you can see here, there's another secondary wall on the back side. So I can't get the nutsert all the way in, and I don't want to drill into that for having a potential leak into the cab of the vehicle. Gently pull out on the quarter panel and that'll allow you to insert your nutsert all the way. Go ahead and tighten up the front quarter panel 10mm bolts.
So we're about to finish up our left driver's side bomber install. It's gone really well. The method that John has come up with has allowed us to do this with little guesswork. Kind of, you know, got it dialed in really well. So we're going to go ahead and lift up the bomber and get this thing installed.
Okay, now we're going to go ahead and install the bomber. We're going to hang it with some of the little side Allens here. Go ahead and tighten up all these bolts now before you tighten up these. Now that these are snugged up, go ahead and snug these up. Now that all the other small bolts are put on, you can go ahead and install the 3 main body bolts. Now the EVO bomber sliders are installed.
All right, now we're ready to install our quarter-pounder front bumper and stinger. Remember, these are 2 separate pieces, so you can install the front bumper independent of the stinger.
Since we're installing the stinger with the bumper, we're going to go with the stinger hardware package. Now that the bumper has been removed, we can go ahead and remove this cross member using a Sawzall or cutoff wheel. Before we remove this cross member, make sure you pull out all these connectors so you remove the wire from the cross member. Go ahead and remove the plastic valance as well. Now on to the other side. Go ahead and mark where you're going to cut the lower cross member off. We're marked up on the same place on both sides. Now you can go ahead and cut. On to the other side.
Cross member's off.
Now that the cross member has been removed, go ahead and grind any burrs that are left on here to get rid of any sharpness. Now that the cross member has been removed, you're going to have to go ahead and remove this long bolt that goes to the rubber isolator for the sway bar motor. Once the bolt's removed, we're going to swing the motor as far backward as possible so we have clearance for the bumper. Now that the bolt has been removed, the motor will now rotate freely on the axis of the sway bar. Now that we remove the bolt, we're going to have to rotate this down, but to do that, you got to remove this wire from a clip in the back. So we're going to do that now and then rotate it. Sometimes you might have to bend the little clip that the wire is on to be able to rotate it past. Now that you rotate it into this position, you're going to have to go ahead and remove this bolt. To remove this bolt, you might need someone to help hold the sway bar motor to keep it from rotating.
Hand in or hand up?
I don't know. Just let's go with it.
3, 2, 1, go.
Now that this bolt's been removed, we're going to have to drill out the hole, but you don't want to go too deep. So we've marked this off with blue tape. You only want to go a ½ inch in. To drill this, you might have to remove the sway bar from both sides to lower it down so you have adequate room for your drill. In this case, we don't have to. Before you reinstall the bolt in the rubber isolator, go ahead and stick this on the bottom side of this clip to keep it from getting in the way. Go ahead and install your isolator bolt. We're going to mock the stinger up to the front bumper and scribe the holes that need to be drilled so we can mount the stinger to the bumper. This is a good time to install the 2 plates that go on either side of the bumper. Carefully lift the front bumper into place. Go ahead and snug up the 2 upper inner bolts for now. Now that the inner bolts have been snugged up, make sure there's no gap here against the stinger and the bumper so that these holes will be drilled in the proper location. Go ahead and scribe the 3 holes on each side of the bumper. On to the other side. Now that the holes have been scribed, go ahead and remove the bumper. Remove the 2 inner plates on both sides and pull the stinger off the bumper. Center punch time. On to the other side. Since we're drilling through 1/4 inch steel plate, I decided to go with a smaller drill bit and finish it up with the proper size. Be sure when you're drilling, use a lubricant. It helps cut through the steel better. Go ahead and repeat this process with the next 5 holes. Yeah, that's good. Now that you're finished with the last hole, we're going to step it up to the right drill bit size. Good. Okay.
Done.
Go ahead and line up your stinger with the bottom of the bumper. I like to use 1 bolt to hold it in place. I like using an alignment tool to help line up the bolt holes. Go ahead and use that and drop one of the bolts in. Continue on with all 6 bolts. Now that all the 6 bolts are put in, go ahead and put the washers and nuts on the backside. Go ahead and tighten all 6. At this time, add 1 more bolt to the top mount and insert your 2 plates on each side on the back side of the bumper. Go ahead and slide the bumper into place. Once the bumper is fit, go ahead and install the lower bolts as well. Go ahead and install the nuts and washers. We're going to go ahead and use a ratchet with a long extension for the outer bolts.
All right, so we just finished installing all our EVO parts. John, thanks so much, brother.
You're welcome.
That was awesome. It took us about a couple days, but let's see what 2 days of work did. All right, we installed our radius fenders on all 4 corners, 1/4 pounder bumper with stinger. We installed the EVO Manufacturing bombers, which is a 2-piece kit and includes the rock skin and the rock slider. We installed the rock skin corners on both sides and the rear, the EVO Manufacturing tire carrier, as well as their Pro Series rear bumper.